Squirrels! So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today we are going to be talking about cards that need buffs. Now, I'm going to split this into two different videos. This one is going to be focusing on specifically the champions that I think need a buffs, and we'll go into a bit more detail than we would perhaps for the other cards. So this video is going to contain just the champions that I think could use with a rework or a little buff here and there, and what that might do potentially for those cards. And then there's going to be a separate video looking at followers and spells. That'll probably be a bit longer, I imagine, because obviously there's more to go through. Yeah, so watch out for that one. And hopefully I'll be able to get them both up today. If not, then I guess one will be up tomorrow, but hopefully I can get them both up by the end of the day. So yeah, keep your eyes out for them, and with that said, let's just dive straight in to some of our first champions. So the first card and champion we are going to look at is Ezreal, which is such a crazy thing to say because of course Ezreal has been one of perhaps the strongest champions going back through the entire lifetime of this game, but since has been nerfed. This number got changed from 8. Ooh. This number here got changed from 8 to 10, and hold on, what's going on with my mouse? And that obviously set Ezreal pretty far back, and he hasn't seen a lot of play since then. And I'm pretty sure they've talked about maybe a redesign for Ezreal, so I wanted to tackle okay, what could I think? Now, I'm not very versed in league lore, so I didn't want to make anything too radical because I don't know if it would fit the character or not. So what I decided essentially on is changing Ezreal to, instead of just targeting enemies 10 times, is to make a you've seen effect. A lot of people complained about Ezreal because they thought he was uninteractive. I found that claim a bit wrong, to be honest. Because of his level up condition is you've targeted enemies 10 plus times, that to me is the most interactive thing you can have. The whole deck is based around interacting with your units. And I get that, then they talk about once Ezreal's leveled up, then he isn't interactive, but to get to that point, you've had to interact a lot. So I found that claim a bit dubious, but I think one way to potentially try and fix this is to have Ezreal be a you've seen him target, however many other enemy units. Probably somewhere it would have to be in the range of about 5, 6, maybe somewhere around that. I think anything lower would maybe be too easy. Anything too higher would just be impossible. But somewhere in that range. Obviously, they'd have to test it and figure out what that range would be. And maybe you could also buff him, make him a bit more resilient, even if it's just making him a 2-3. Because, of course, once it becomes a you've seen effect, you essentially want to then play Ezreal, as soon as you can, probably on turn 3. And so then you'd probably want to make use of his Nexus Strike ability, which, very rarely gets used in the actual normal game. So that would be a way of making this, more relevant. Because you would want to play Ezreal turn 3, and these Mystic Shots, then would be more useful, I guess. And so I think that would be a healthy way of potentially keeping Ezreal strong, whilst, changing him in a relevant way that still keeps him, fairly similar to what he is right now. The next card is one of my personal favorites, and a champion that I think most people would probably agree needs to be buffed in some way. She hasn't seen much play really ever. She has a very unique ability, and that is Katarina, of course, in the rally effect, potentially rallying multiple times in one round, and feels very different and unique to all of the champions. One thing I noticed a lot of people have claimed could be changed is this Death Lotus. It doesn't really fit with Katarina and what Katarina is trying to do. I get that, league-wise, this might be, perhaps a signature spell of hers in terms of, normal league, and so therefore they make it the champion spell. But, the design of this card doesn't really fit with Katarina. I have no problem with the card and what it does overall, but, I think other people have suggested that Shunpo would fit better with Katarina as her champion spell. But how would I change Katarina overall? Well, I had this idea when someone pointed out that if you go Oblivious Islander into Katarina and make her 2 mana, and she strikes with Ephemeral, she'll actually recall before she strikes and level up before she dies. Which is a nice little cool synergy there. And that made me think, Why isn't Katarina just 2 mana? Anyway. And I just think it makes so much more sense. Now, I'm just talking about normal Katarina. Leveled up Katarina, I would probably still keep at 4. My guess is that they wanted it to be 4 so that you couldn't rally 3 times in the same round. And potentially, you know, if it was your attack turn anyway, get 4 attacks off in the same round, you know, on turn like 9 and 10. That makes sense to me, that, you know, might be, you know, if your opponent has no cards and you can just win the game on one turn, yeah, that might be a bit much. So I understand that, and I think I would keep Katarina at 4 mana, the leveled up version, but I don't understand why Katarina can't be 2 mana for the normal version. Now, you might want to get rid of the Fleeting Blade's Edge, because that might be a bit strong, right? Like, if you pass turn 1 and play Katarina 2, you could, you know, potentially kill their 1-drop and also, you know, get Katarina leveled up, etc. But Katarina's problem is that she's a big tempo loss. And, you know, because obviously you're recalling her and then you have to replay her again. It's like, yeah, you get the rally, but then, you know, you're losing tempo. And on turn 3, that's like a crucial turn in Runeterra, turn 3. You know, that's when every deck has to start doing something. Otherwise, you're wasting mana. And so, you know, you start thinking about, okay, I know that I need to do something this turn. So if you haven't done anything turn 2 or 3, you can't really ever play Katarina, because, you know, it's such a big tempo loss that, you know, you're just giving your opponent control of the board for essentially 3 damage, which obviously isn't very good. Turn 2, however, is much different. Not every deck starts on turn 2. If you lose that turn 2, you know, if you played a spell that, you know, fizzled on turn 2, it's not the end of the world. It's only turn 2, you know, there's plenty more turns. You've got time to recoup and build a board, and that is where I think, you know, Katarina could be utilized. I'm thinking, like, imagine a scenario where you've got, you know, turn 1, do whatever. Turn 2, you go into Katarina, you know, you attack, you strike, you recall to Katarina. Turn 3, you play something like Reckless Trifarian. And then turn 4, you know, you can play Katarina. You know, you can attack with Reckless Trifarian. This is your attacking on evens in this scenario. And then you play Katarina, and then you attack with it again, and it's a 5/4, and it's a big body, and it, you know, puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. That sounds like a really cool idea, right? But the problem is, at the moment, is Katarina, you know, it's just a bit too slow. So that's how I changed Katarina, and I think it would be a great change for her as a card, and would probably create completely new decks that no one's ever played before. And I think that would be really, really exciting. And remember, 3/2 stat line on turn 2 with quick attack is the same as Lucian. So, you know, it's nothing unique in any way. So I really think it would help fix Katarina and really, really put her in a place where you can genuinely build strong decks around her. The next one up is Shyvana, and Shyvana is a champion that when was first released, I saw a lot of people hyping up Shyvana as this really strong champion, but Shyvana and the dragon deck has one, to me, fatal flaw in that there is no 3-drop dragon. That to me is just very clearly the problem with the deck, is that either you get the Herald of Dragons and then able to play like one of the 2 4-drop dragons, with Shyvana being one of them, or you don't and you just lose. And that's essentially what I think goes on with that deck, and therefore I think Shyvana has to be 3 mana. Obviously, you'd have to drop her stats down. You know, maybe it would be 2/3, and then, you know, with the attack would become 3/4. Maybe you could work around something else. I don't know. But the main thing for me is she just has to be 3 mana, or you have to make a dragon 3 mana at least to make Shyvana a viable champion. Next up is our boy Taric, and he obviously has his place and is unique in the game, but I think his stat line is just too lacking to really see enough play. So I would personally like to see him be a 3/4. You might think that that's a bit too much. You might think, well, what are you doing? Because he gets tough as well, and he gives something else tough. But when you compare that to Shen, who is already a 4 mana 3/5 that gives someone else barrier, that's essentially a bit worse. Now, of course, Taric's ability can, you know, potentially snowball and create more, but I just think that 2 attack just isn't enough to warrant ever playing him. And I think if you made him 3 attack, then that would be much more, there'd be much more possibility to use Taric and find different ways of using him. I think he's a really interesting champion, but at the moment his stat line is just not good enough to warrant play. I know the whole point for this kind of deck is to, you know, buff up sort of him and another target and sort of create these really, if you will, tall creature bases. You know, instead of going wide, you're going tall with these kind of, you know, permanently sticky big units. Well, and you might claim that, you know, that would become strong, and maybe it would. You could always revert it back. I don't think it would be completely game changing. I think it would just make him viable, and maybe, you know, pretty good, but I don't think it would make him impossible to play against. So that's what I'd personally like to see for ya boy Taric. Next up is Quinn, and I think Quinn is a champion that a lot of people would like to see buffed, but it's actually really hard to buff. I know a lot of people would have claimed to change the stats on either Quinn or Vala, and I'm pretty sure that the design team have mentioned that changing Quinn's stats would just make her too good, and I potentially don't disagree with them. You know, if they've playtested it, and they probably have, you know, I'll trust them that, you know, I haven't played with a Quinn that's a, you know, 4/4 or even a 3/5 or whatever. So I'll trust them that that's right. I think what you could change with Quinn would be to change the level up condition to where it's not an I've seen, but it's just you have attacked X amount of times. This, of course, still warrants playing a scout or rally deck, or both, and would still require that. Obviously, it'd have to be more than 4. You're talking probably somewhere in the range of about 8 for that. You know, you think about it. If it was 8 by turn 5, you would have had to have attacked with scouts every time. If it was like 7, 8, somewhere in that range, I could definitely see it. And obviously, you could play Quinn a bit later on, like turn 6 or whatever, and wait for your attacks a bit more. Yeah, maybe more 6, 7 rather than 8, thinking about it in my head now. But somewhere in that range, you know, and just allows Quinn to level up a bit easier, so that when you do get Quinn, you know, you are getting leveled up Quinn all the time, and now she's a bit buffier, a bit bigger in size, and obviously can, you know, get a Vala every time she attacks as well, which obviously would be quite nice. So now we come on to another champion that I think everyone probably would agree needs a buff, needs a change in some sort of way, and that is Vladimir, who has struggled pretty much throughout the entire span of the game. And why is that? Well, Vladimir has a significant problem in that he doesn't know whether he is a mid-range sort of, you know, value champion or a aggro finisher champion. He's kind of stuck in the middle, and they added in this drain instead of, you know, deal 1 and drain 1, which kind of turned him more mid-range, but I think that that is not where Vladimir is at all. Vladimir should be an aggro finisher champion. That is my personal view, just because of this effect, to me, says you're willing to kill off your allies to deal damage to the enemy's nexus straight up. That's not a mid-range thing. You don't want to kill off your allies if you're mid-range. You want to keep them there. You want to build that board. You think classic Demacia. You think, you know, building up a solid board throughout the entire game and then just overwhelming your opponent with strong stats, right? Whereas Vladimir is not doing that. He's saying, I'm going to kill these things, or at least help to kill them, to hit your nexus directly. That's about as aggro as you can get. And so I've suggested this change before, but I really do think that this should be Vladimir's change. Just get rid of the drain effect. Have him deal 1 to 2 allies to deal 2 to the enemy nexus when he is leveled up. Keep this as the normal one. Then when this, you know, Vladimir levels up, because his level up isn't too difficult to require, you know, change that number to 2, and all of a sudden you've got an aggro finisher that, you know, works really well. And in sort of a wide board zoo type archetype would be really quite good, I think. And with this change as well, I'd also love to see the Crimson units changed to where it is only self-damage. What do I mean? Well, let's go on to Crimson Disciple. I'll just look at the Crimson units in general here. They currently say when I survive damage, right? I would love this to be when you deal damage to me, because then you could change Crimson Disciple back to deal 2 to the enemy nexus. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, whoa, don't do that. But the problem Crimson Disciple had before was that you could never block Crimson Disciple. On turn 2, Crimson Disciple would come down, and if you didn't have, you know, 3-2 ready to go in return, Crimson Disciple would attack, and you can either chump block it and take the 2 damage, or you can, you know, just let the 2 damage go through. Well, now you could chump block something like Crimson Disciple, because it's only self-damage. And that, I think, would be really important to changing these cards. It would also differentiate these cards from the Scar cards in Freljord. If you type in Scar, see what comes up. I'm obviously looking at, like, Unscarred Reaver. I think it would be a good way to differentiate the Crimson units, self-damage, to the Scar cards, which are just any damage. I think that would be really helpful, and I think that would be a good change where the synergy with Vladimir would be higher again, and would allow you to you know, build a sort of really cool self-damage deck as opposed to just, you know, any damage deck. And finally on this list of champions we see Hecarim. Now Hecarim is a champion that probably, you know, might surprise some people. He's not the worst champion in the game, and I don't think he is. I think my issue with Hecarim, not even issue per se, but I'd just love to see Hecarim have a bit of a change here with regards to his wording on his level up. Because the problem he has at the moment is he attacks and everything is to the right of him, all of his ephemeral allies or whatever. And so if he dies, they lose the effect. I think what I'd like to see is just a change of wording that would allow for the buff that he gives his ephemeral allies to sustain even if he dies. I think that would be a cool change, and, you know, just the smallest amount of change, just to power him up a bit. But I'm sure most of you would agree that wouldn't be, you know, a game-breaking change, but it would help him, because I feel like that's just an issue that just kind of plagues him. I'm sure you could find a wording that, you know, makes that work in a way. And so, you know, even if it's like attack, summon 2 spectral riders with +3 attack, right? That would be a cool way, I think, of just helping him just the tiniest little smidge. And so there you have all the champions that I think need, you know, maybe just a little bit of touching up or whatever. As I say, as a reminder, watch out for the ones about follows and spells as well. Keep your eyes peeled for that one, and yeah, leave a comment down if you have any thoughts about these changes, how you would change some of the champions or champions that you think need to be changed. Remember, this is buffs. I made a video for nerfs as well that you can check out, so be sure to leave a like. Let me know definitely what you guys think. I kind of love this whole discussion about cards, so let me know what you think about that, and I will see you next time.